Welcome to Hye Roots, Descendants of Ararat. I am George Aghjayan, your host for this episode of the first series devoted to Armenian genealogy. With each new episode of Hye Roots, we will explore different resources that will aid those wishing to learn more about their Armenian family history. Today I am joined by Diane Hall, the archivist and historian for Delta Gamma Fraternity. Welcome, Diane.
Hi, George. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
I'm very excited to have you for this episode. Around 3 months ago, Diane sent an email to the Armenian Cultural Association of America hoping to learn more about an article she had run across in the November 1920 issue of Ankara, the award-winning magazine published continuously since 1884 by the Delta Gamma Fraternity. Diane, can you start by telling us a little about the history of Delta Gamma, their membership and mission?
Absolutely. The first thing that I think I should tell your viewers is that even though our name is the Delta Gamma Fraternity, we are in fact a sorority. Delta Gamma was founded in 1873 before the word sorority was invented. We were founded in Oxford, Mississippi at Lewis School by Anna Boyd, Eva Webb, and Mary Kharpert. These were three friends from the same small town in Mississippi who were sent to Lewis School to finish their education. They were unable to return home for the winter holidays and instead turned to each other for support and friendship. Now, they had witnessed male acquaintances of theirs joining fraternities at the nearby University of Mississippi, and they decided to form their own club. Now, very importantly, in the records we have from them, they are adamant they received no help from the men. They created Delta Gamma as a society of mutual helpfulness and chose the Greek letters Delta and Gamma and the motto Do Good. Today, we have 280,000 members across the world, 149 active collegiate chapters across the United States and Canada. Throughout our history, there have been many projects that have been undertaken to live our motto, including in 1936, the selection of our fraternity-wide philanthropy, Service for Sight, to support the blind and visually impaired community. We've been a leader in the fraternal world throughout our history, including in 2019, we were the very first NPC organization to start a contextualization project to examine our history. NPC stands for the National Pan-Hellenic Conference. It's an association of 26 national and international sororities, and Delta Gamma was a founding member of NPC. I should also mention that we are currently in the process of digitizing our archival collection and making it available in an online database. So if any of your viewers are interested in anything we're going to be going over today, they can actually access our database at deltagamma.historyit.com.
Excellent, fantastic. That's great history, very interesting, and I know it's something that every member is proud of, that legacy. So specific to your question, can you tell us about the article that caught your eye and what you were hoping to learn?
Yes, so just a little context here. The company that is digitizing our archives is called History IT, and they started by digitizing all of the back issues we have of the Ankara. Now, we often find that the cultural and political concerns of the nation and even the world have been reflected in the articles that have been published throughout the Ankara's history. And one thing I had always wondered was if any of our members had written articles in the Ankara about the women's suffrage movement or the passing of the 19th Amendment. So after all of these issues got digitized and were more easily gone through, I started to look for, again, if any of our members had written anything about the women's suffrage movement. And that's when I came across the article that you showed from 1920. And the first line that caught my attention was a sentence that read, "Here is further news on our war work." Now, during World War I, Delta Gamma had funded 2 orphanages in Belgium for child victims of the war. This is a very well-known story to us, so I was expecting to see some details on that war work. What I found instead was a story about a woman named Mariam and a younger sister that I believe the article refers to as Dawn, and that they were from Armenia. And as I read through it, I became enthralled. The details in this article indicated that Delta Gamma had provided some kind of substantial aid to these two sisters, and that the younger sister had been through some very traumatic events. But at that time, at least according to the article, was doing well and was thinking of going to school to be either a pharmacist or a doctor. And this was very surprising because, again, I knew a lot about our war work in Belgium, but I had never heard about this. So I did a little digging online and found that the timeline seemed to coincide with the Armenian Genocide, which I'm going to be honest, I knew about, but I didn't know a lot about. And I also found that there was some connection to one of our members, a woman named Alice Shepard Riggs. And that's when I reached out to the Armenian Cultural Association of America to try and find more information. And that's how I was able to connect with you.
Okay, let's take a look inside the vault. After Diane and I had a chance to chat, she located quite a few more articles in the Ankara magazine. Alice Shepard first appears in 1909, and we can follow her time at Syracuse University, her earning Phi Beta Kappa honors, marriage to Ernest Riggs, and arrival in Kharpert in 1910. American missionaries first arrived in the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, and throughout that century their numbers grew and the institutions expanded. Both Alice and Ernest came from missionary families. Alice had been born in Aintab and Ernest in Marsovan. There are a number of resources available for Armenians with close ties to American missionaries. The archives of the various sponsoring entities are one place to look. In this case, the Riggs and Shepards were attached to the American Board of Commissioners of Foreign Missions, or ABCFM for short. Formed in 1810, it would become the largest and most influential of the missionary societies. Their archives are held at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There is a finding aid for the massive collection of material related to their activities. In this collection, one can find the annual reports of various mission stations as well as the academic institutions they ran. There is correspondence from missionaries, both official and with family members. Some mission stations and academic institutions produced newsletters. Some of what they produced was obviously geared towards donors and raising funds. The archives of the publication, the Missionary Herald, also contains insight into their daily lives and the work they were undertaking among the local populations. The material up to 1919 has been microfilmed, and Bilkent University in Turkey has cataloged the microfilm for the ABC-FM's Turkey mission. This catalog can be found online. Unfortunately, rarely will Armenian names appear, like most catalogs. It is the author of the document or the recipient of the letter that is noted with the date and place of correspondence. However, if you know where your family was from and that they were involved with missionary institution or missionary family, it can be a valuable resource to add context to the events of their lives. Alice and Ernest Riggs were stationed in Kharpert after their marriage in 1910, as noted. There is a tremendous amount of material about the Kharpert mission station, both in print and in the ABC-FM archives, particularly for the time period prior to and during the Armenian Genocide. And these were resources I consulted for this query by Diane. But first, let's return to the Ankara, where the first news of the Armenian Genocide and the impact on Alice's life appears in the April 1916 issue. I quote, "Mrs. Riggs, whose husband is president of Euphrates College of Kharpert, Turkey and Asia, is returning to America with her husband and two small boys. The Armenians, among whom they have been working, have been butchered and deported until there is not much to keep educators in Turkey at present. In addition to the harrowing experiences which they have just gone through, Mrs. Riggs has had to bear the sad loss of her father, who died from typhus caught in the hospital in Turkey where he was chief surgeon. From the 1915 consular registration for American citizens for Ernest, we know the names of the children being referred to and their dates of birth, both of whom were born in Kharpert. Lauren Andrews Riggs, born June 11, 1912, and Douglas Shepard Riggs, born November 15, 1914. Alice's father was the esteemed Dr. Frederick Shepard, and in 1920, Alice published the book Shepard of Aintab about his life and work. While the article cited mentions Alice's two small boys, it does not mention the adopted Mariam. From various published accounts, we know the Riggs left Kharpert in November 1915. The government delayed their departure, presumably so as not to follow too closely the death caravans of Armenians. Yet even then, along the way, they witnessed enough horror to understand well the magnitude of the crime that was being committed against the Armenian people. And I quote, "As we traveled beyond diaspora, we met a procession of exiles being driven towards that city, and we were obliged to drive through this procession the full length. I shall never forget the agony of those faces, women and children. There were old, white-haired women, hardly able to walk, but prodded on by the guards who followed them. There were mothers carrying their little children or dragging them along by the hand, and there were many little girls with little bodies and old, worn, haggard faces. This procession filled the road as far as the eye could see. As we came to the end of the procession, we saw that what we had dreaded. The weak and sick ones were dragging behind and were being driven by those mounted guards. As we came around a curve, we found a man being stripped of his garments while yet alive. He was too weak to resist, and before we went out of sight, he was stoned to death." End quote. The Riggs party included Reverend Ira Pierce and his wife, and Margaret Campbell. Interestingly, both Reverend Pierce and Margaret Campbell would play a role in Georgetown Boys Farm. In the 1920s, over 100 Armenian orphan boys were brought to Canada to learn agriculture, and 39 Armenian women to work as domestic servants. Margaret would also adopt an Armenian orphan girl, but that is a story for another day. The Riggs would stay in Beirut for the remainder of World War I. In a letter from Ernest dated December 19, 1918, he details their leaving Beirut on November 26, 1918, and the travel complications caused by their long, out-of-date passports. Significantly, it is the first mention of Mariam, their adopted daughter. While she had traveled with the Riggs from Beirut, we learned from the ship manifest of their arrival to the United States that Mariam was not with them. The November 1919 issue of Ankara mentions how the Riggs adopted Mariam in 1915. Mariam was said to be around 18 years old. Her mother and a sister were sent on the death march, while a younger sister was dragged to a Turkish harem. Delta Gamma wanted to help Mariam with her schooling so that she could then help her people, and in this way honor the unselfish life of Alice Shepard Riggs, their Delta Gamma sister. Thus, they allotted $1,000 for Mariam's education and another $4,000 to $5,000 for relief work under the supervision of Ernest and Alice. The January 1920 issue of Ankara contains a lengthy letter from Alice about the life of Mariam and an update on the whereabouts of her two surviving sisters. We learn that Mariam's older sister was a teacher at the girls' school in Kharpert before the genocide and had been able to remain throughout the war. The younger sister, referred to by the English equivalent Radiance, was finally released by her captors. As of that writing, she was helping in the home of an American doctor in Kharpert. Alice closes her letter with a plea for an American mandate for Armenia. Another update on the sisters can be found in the November 1923 issue of Ankara. Mariam had graduated from Northfield Seminary and looked forward to continuing her education at Lesley School for Kindergarten Training in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We finally learn the older sister's name, Olga, and that she was overseeing Armenian women in sewing work as part of the relief efforts. Ultimately, both sisters made their way to Beirut, where they were trained as nurses in the American hospital attached to the Beirut University. Armed with this new information, I was able to learn more about Mariam and her sisters. Let's share what we have learned with Diane. Welcome back, Diane. I want to thank you so much for bringing this question to HyeRoots. The quantity and quality of information related to American missionaries and their relationship with Armenians allows for meaningful research. The key information that opened the floodgates to learn more about Mariam were the names of her sisters, given as Olga and Radiance. In 1942, a memorial book was published for Euphrates College, and it contains the list of graduates, along with a short biography and sometimes a photograph. There is only one graduate that fits the description of Mariam's sister Olga, and that is Oghda Genovesian, born in Kharpert and graduated in 1910. Her biography matches what we know of Olga, including attending nurses training at American Hospital in Beirut. And we learn that she married Gyaragos Melkonyan and lived in Methuen, Massachusetts. From this information, I found the ship manifest for Olga's arrival to the United States in 1928 with her stepdaughter Vatanush. While she was joining her husband Gyaragos in New Hampshire, the closest relative remaining in country whence came was her sister Payladzou, which can be translated into English as Radiance. Learning the last name of the sisters allowed me to also find the ship manifest for Mariam arriving in the United States 1 month after the Riggs, who she listed as the guardian she was joining. Payladzou, as director of the Armenian National Sanatorium in Beirut, would travel to the United States in 1949. While here, she had a number of speaking engagements and apparently met her husband, Paul Manoukian, in Fresno, where they married in March of that year. In 1962, Alice Shepard Riggs received the prestigious Order of the Delta Gamma Rose, and the news of this award was carried in the Heidelberg Weekly, our own newspaper here. Diane, can you tell us a bit about this award?
Yes. So the Order of the Delta Gamma Rose is the highest award presented by the fraternity. It was started in 1952, a time when women were, often not getting the credit they deserved in their respective fields. The award honors alumna members who have made distinguished contributions to the nation or the world, and Alice certainly fits this. Delta Gammas in virtually every field have received this award, from business, education, journalism, government, social services, entertainment, etc.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And knowing the life Alice lived, her parents as well,
Yes.
they had for the Armenian community in Aintab, in Kharpert, and even afterwards with Anatolia College in Greece, where the family was, continued to be active and have a role. It was well-deserving and an appropriate person to choose for such an award. And I guess that leads to the next question. Do you have any thoughts about what we have learned about the lives of Alice, Mariam, Oghda, and Payladzou?
As I've learned about their lives, it's very emotional to think about what this family went through, and the three sisters not just being separated, but then their own individual experiences during that separation. And while I'm happy that Mariam was able to receive helps from the Riggs family and by extension Delta Gamma, it does make me think about all those who were not that lucky. And I hope that the few $1,000s that Delta Gamma provided did help provide relief to some.
Well, I can tell you from my own family's experience with the missionaries as well, and the aid that was given, obviously, it was vital to their survival. So there's no question that it had what Delta Gamma did was meaningful and had an impact. And I guess, really, it makes me think, if you have any final thoughts on what today's members of Delta Gamma and others listening can take from Alice's life work.
So I think what we can take away is, as I mentioned before, Delta Gamma's motto is do good. And we also have Article 2 in the Delta Gamma Constitution that really outlines what our values are. And it reads that the object of this fraternity shall be the highest ideals of friendship among women, to promote their educational and cultural interests, to create in them a true sense of social responsibility, and to develop in them the best qualities of character. And these are principles that Delta Gammas work hard to uphold and to just make the world a better place for all. and they can be lived in large and small ways. Alice taking Mariam in helped. It didn't end the horrors that were happening, but she did what she was able to do. And, if we all strive every day to do good and uphold the highest ideals of friendship, I think we can really succeed in making a difference. I think that's what we can take away from this story.
Absolutely. I really, it is a wonderful sentiments to aspire to for all of us. And I really want to thank you so much, Diane, for joining me today and sharing this meaningful story with us. And for those of you watching, I hope you found this episode useful in your own Armenian family history research. If you have a question for a future episode, please send it to HyeRoots@Haydanik.com.